Hi, my name is Tina Aswani Omprakash. I'm a patient advocate, founder of the blog ownyourcrohns.com, and I am the president and co-founder of the nonprofit charity called South Asian IBD Alliance, which we call SAIA for short. So, in terms of my diagnosis, I have Crohn's disease. I was diagnosed a little over 18 years ago, and it was initially diagnosed as ulcerative colitis, which is a sister disease with an umbrella term known as inflammatory bowel disease or IBD. My diagnosis was a little bit tricky. I was trying to be proactive and get a colonoscopy. I grew up with a lot of IBS, irritable bowel symptoms, and what I was dealing with was a lot of constipation and also acid reflux, so GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease. That's a lot of what I was dealing with as a child, and as a child, I had extraintestinal manifestations, like with my eyes. They were red a lot of times, and it was called allergic conjunctivitis. I had tons of joint pain, and it was just, oh, she's growing as a young patient. So it was kind of just sort of pushed off as, this will go away as she grows up, it'll be fine. But I actually do think I had inflammatory bowel disease since childhood, given all these manifestations. And when I was 21, I first got health insurance. I didn't have health insurance as a child. When I did get a diagnosis, though, was after pushing a lot. When I was 21 with my first job out of college, my doctor was initially saying, "Oh, you don't need a colonoscopy. South Asians don't get, CRC, meaning colorectal cancer. They don't get IBD." And I was like, no, no, doc. My father passed away from Crohn's that turned into colorectal cancer. I think we really need to take this seriously. Took a lot of pushing for me to finally be referred to a gastroenterologist. And even when I was referred to a gastroenterologist, when he did a colonoscopy, I wasn't even told that I had, mild ulcerative colitis at the time. This was January 2006. So I still didn't have a diagnosis. It wasn't until my first flare up 6 months later uh, that I was diagnosed properly and actually told I had this diagnosis, if that makes sense. So it was kind of crazy. It was like a rigmarole trying to get that diagnosis. And even still, he didn't put me on medication. So I was just like, wait, yes, it might be mild, but don't I need to be on some kind of medication or something to treat this? It just felt like I just have to keep pushing and pushing to get any sort of answers or solutions. So it was a long and like windy diagnosis journey. So it was an interesting time because I was like 22 years old, and I also was like, gosh, I know I have this diagnosis. I know I probably need medications, but like, I also just wanted to live my life. I'm finally out of college. I want to go out with my friends. I want to work. I had a great Wall Street career. And I was just like, what am I doing chasing this diagnosis? But at the same time, like, I had bouts of being really sick. I was losing weight. I was on the toilet a lot, and I was bleeding. And I was like, I got to do something. So this began a journey of like, I think I went through 6 to 7 doctors, GI doctors, okay, in New Jersey, trying to find somebody who really understood IBD. This was 2006. There were no centers of excellence at the time that I knew of in New Jersey. And many of the doctors kept telling me, you need to go to Philadelphia, or you need to go to New York City. We can't treat this here. I was just like, what? So it took me 6 or 7 doctors to finally get to the doctor that I saw in New York City. And they all were trying to put me on steroids. That, like, I was just like, how is that still the mainstay of therapy? My father was on steroids for 15 years. He developed cancer. Clearly, this is not a good treatment option. long term. And I knew that at 22, just having seen what my dad went through when I was 8 years old when he passed away. So I was kind of like, okay, I got to do better for myself. I'm not going to be sitting on steroids for the rest of my life like he did. So at that point, I decided I'm going to see a doctor in New York City, and I realized maybe I should see somebody who is affiliated with the university. I got pretty good care at that point. He was really trying to rule out Crohn's disease because I was only presenting with symptoms in my colon. So it was limited to the disease was limited to the colon. It's like inflammation in the colon and in the rectum. So I had a lot of urgency. I was using a lot of suppositories. And he put me on a good medication. I went into remission and just got better quality of life. Um, but soon thereafter, like within a few months of getting that quality of life back, I did flare up. As you know, with autoimmune conditions and chronic illnesses, you can have flare ups and, periods of remission. So I was, you know, I was like really grateful that I had that period of remission, but I was like, how do I get this to be more consistent? Because it came right back. And when it came right back was a trip to Mexico. My husband, he was my boyfriend back then, took me for my 24th birthday to Cancun, and both of us came back really sick, especially me. And I didn't really recover, to be honest with you. I was put on antibiotics. I developed an infection called C. difficile, C. diff, and that was just the end of it. It worsened my IBD to the point where I actually needed surgery. It took a good 6 to 8 months for all of this to play out. I lost a lot of weight. I went from 135 pounds down to 85 pounds. So I lost 50 pounds. Like I was just like scared to even check my weight. And like I was 24 and the hair on my head was like graying. It was just like my eyebrows were graying. I was just like, what is this disease? Like, how am I this malnourished? And my doctors were like pushing for a class of drugs called biologics. They were pretty new back then, relatively new, just in the last like 5 to 7 years had come out. And my mom at the time and my family was just so scared of these drugs after what had happened to my dad with steroids. And not just that, like culturally, there's like this expectation that we should be trying like Ayurveda or naturopathy or Chinese medicine or homeopathy well before we go on to any Western medicine. There's a lot of mistrust in our community. And I think it dates back to colonization of like South Asia by the British. So they were just like, no, 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 there's a lot of side effects with Western medicine. Try these all natural things first. But this is an immune mediated inflammatory disorder. The inflammation doesn't just calm down on its own. Oftentimes you do need medication to try to treat it. So I didn't know that. Like being new to chronic illness, this was the first one I had accumulated. Now I have many. But I really didn't know how to like keep pushing for myself and advocating for myself. And I was also up against, I have my doctor here saying one thing, and I have my family here saying another. And in Asian communities, a lot of respect and importance goes to your elders, and what they say is gold. I mean, honestly, that's how I've been raised, is we listen to our elders. And when you're feeling this tug of war between your doctor and your family, it's just like, who do I listen to? The person who's going to take care of me, my mother, right? My grandparents, right? They're going to take care of me through this process. So I was really caught in between my GI doctor and my family. And it wasn't just my family saying this, it was like our family friends, extended families saying, oh, no, 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 Tina, those drugs are dangerous. So there was definitely some cultural barriers to my care, and also just a lack of understanding that this is more than irritable bowel syndrome. Irritable bowel syndrome, like, it's not easy to treat. Don't get me wrong. It can be very difficult to deal with. But like a lot of times, a change of diet, some medications might help. But and lifestyle too. With IBD, it's like a whole other animal. Like, you might need some serious medications in the class of, immunosuppression, in the class of chemotherapy, and serious surgeries to handle IBD. And oftentimes people would say to me, "Oh, at least it's not cancer. At least it's not cancer." I mean, this was a pretty terrible disease to deal with, to be honest with you, and I still live with it. So I've been through a lot with this disease, and it took a lot of acceptance that, maybe my family wasn't right in this case, and that I do have to listen to the doctor. But what happened was, in the process, my care got delayed, and I did end up losing my colon. And I do wonder till this date, had I started on the biologic earlier when it was first suggested to me, could I have saved my colon? It was a surgery called a total proctocolectomy. On the 4th of July in 2008, I went into emergency surgery on Independence Day. So it was truly my very own independence from my colon, which was wreaking havoc on my life for the last 8 months. um, at this point, I was like 85 pounds, and it was a really, really tough time. I had a pick line in my arm. So I have scars all over both my arms from pick lines, and even had them in my neck, a central line, sort of feeding me. Because I was not absorbing any nutrition from food. So I had to be prepared for surgery. The thing with surgery is, a lot of times patients and their families consider it a last resort. My family certainly did. So did I, especially in ostomy. And there was a lot of cultural pressures here too. It's like, with an ostomy, my family immediately said, "Your dad had one, and he hated it." And in his last days, all he wanted to do was rip the bag off because he hated it so much. And I was like, "Well, I'm like dying like this. I don't really care if I have a bag on my abdomen. I just want to have a life again and be 24 again." And so my family's like, "Who's going to marry you? You have this wonderful boyfriend. Do you think he's actually going to marry you with an ostomy?" Yeah. I mean, these are the kinds of things that were said to me. And, we think it's horrible, but at the same time, culturally speaking, this is appropriate. Like, this was considered appropriate. "Hey, Tina, we just have your best interest in mind. You're never going to get married with this thing. How are you going to have kids with this thing?" And it was kind of spoken like that. Like, "Oh, how are you going to enter the prayer room? Like, how are you going to pray? Like, this is considered foul. Women on their period aren't supposed to be praying in the prayer room. It's considered dirty, disgusting." And like, there was all these sort of cultural issues that were brought up. And I didn't realize at the time that this is much broader than me, that people in our community in South Asia are facing exactly this. They're not getting jobs. They're not able to enter the kitchen. They're not able to pray in the prayer room. They're sort of shunned from their families and society just because they have an ostomy. And so, what I was experiencing was cultural stigma. And I had no idea. And I was like, "I don't care what my family says. I am dying at this point." And I went against my family and went ahead with surgery, even though I knew that, these are the people who are going to take care of me. But this is the reality of what patients are facing. It's not just me, this is much bigger than me. The stigma is intense. And what we're going through psychosocially on an emotional health level is significant anxiety, depression, trauma, because of what we're facing, both culturally, but also from our physicians not understanding what we are going through on a cultural level. not being able to speak to me or my family with the cultural cognizance, saying, you know what, she's going to be much better. Don't worry about some of these aspects. I have seen other patients get married. I've seen other patients thrive in a variety of communities, and we're going to help you get through this. Nobody ever said that to me. And if they did, it could have made a world of a difference. So I didn't really have time to prepare emotionally for the surgery. I was not even marked for an ostomy. Most patients are marked on their abdomen exactly where they're going to get the stoma. The portion of the intestine that's coming out of the abdomen is called a stoma. And I was told as I was going in to the ER, look, Tina, for my surgeon, who's also Asian, by the way, he said to me, look, Tina, you know, you've waited a really long time to have this surgery. I don't know if I'm going to be able to save you, but I'm going to do my best. He's like, you've lost a lot of weight. You're malnourished. I have spoken to the chief of surgery here. We're going to do our best. And I was just like, oh my God, what is happening? Like, how did I end up? Like, I was at the top of my life. How did I like end up like this? And I think it was like an 8-hour surgery. And I woke up um, in a ton of pain. I've never experienced that level of pain at that point in my life. And I was just like, the first thing I wanted to see is my abdomen. Like, what does this thing look like? I was really out of sorts. And I had this clear plastic like bag on my abdomen. It was like clear. Usually I wear opaque now so that I don't have to look at the stool. But you can see little driplets, like, sorry for the TMI, little driplets of stool coming out. And I was just like, oh my God, what is this thing? And my boyfriend comes in and he's like, oh my God, he looks like Snuffleupagus. I think that moment of waking up and having a smile on my face and laughing really brought some joy into my life that I was one alive. And this thing wasn't, the stoma was not nearly as scary as I thought it was going to be. In the process, like my family was fighting with me. They were like, how could you have done this? Like, you know, there's no turning back from this. You have no colon, you have most of your rectum is gone. And I was like, you know what? I really have to see what this is like. You know, my doctor said for ulcerative colitis, this would be curative to remove the colon and most of the rectum. And he also said that over 3 stages, I would undergo a reversal of the ostomy and have a J shaped pouch fashioned out of my small intestine. And that would be an internal pouch, but I would go to the bathroom 6 to 8 times a day. So go number two, 6 to 8 times a day. But I think, you know, my mom was helping me change the bag. She was familiar with it with my dad too. And she saw a completely different attitude in me versus his experience. I was like, you know what? I'm alive. I didn't think I would get this far. And so I'm thankful. I'm thankful to my stoma for giving me that life back. It turned out that I had Crohn's disease. And I just feel like all of this was like dictated by cultural stigma. If we could just do more awareness work and education saying, make your decisions knowing everything before you go into the surgery. So can an ostomy give you your life back? Absolutely. Can a J pouch give you your life back? Absolutely. But my family had such a huge family history of Crohn's disease that I really didn't even want to go down the route of having a J pouch. And sometimes I wish I didn't, but I can't live here with regrets. My ostomy gave me my life back, even though I've had several surgeries, about almost 2 dozen surgeries over the years, dealing with my ostomy, multiple fistulas, multiple intestinal resections. You know what? I'm in a better place now with my ostomy, and I'm grateful for it. So here's the thing. After all these surgeries and after going through so much with this disease, I am on a biologic and I have an ostomy and I'm stable and in remission. Have I had my ups and downs? Who doesn't with chronic illness? Everybody does. And I'm like, how much misery would I have saved myself had I been educated and had biologics and, medications in general, and had ostomy surgery been destigmatized? I wanted to be the change that I was seeking in the world. Had this education existed, my life would have been different. And I didn't want others suffering the way that I have. Of course, we can only bring the horse to the water, right? We can't force them to drink it. But the reason why I started doing my advocacy work, and started ownyourcrohns.com, it was very hard for me. I'm not going to lie. I first brought it up to my husband in 2014 saying, I'm on social media and I'm seeing other patients talk about IBD and ostomies and J pouches. I want to do this. I've had to do so much research over the years and really um, become well versed in this disease. And I think I can help people. And no one's talking about the cultural stuff that, I've been through, but I feel like so many more people are suffering from it. And I remember my husband saying, Tina, this is going to be social suicide. Our family is going to have, both sides of our families are going to have a conniption. And like, Tina, you're going to expose us. And what is this going to mean for us? We're going to be the black sheep of the family. That's literally what happened, though. And I've been so out since then, so to speak. I've been public about my story since 2018, so about 6.5 years now. And I just feel like, as hard as it was for me to come out with this story, and even though I lost maybe family and friends, many people have come around since, recognizing that what I'm doing is making an impact on people's lives. But I think when I started Own Your Crohn's, there was such a flood of messages from patients from all over the world, from multiple countries and communities of color. So from South America, from Africa, from the Middle East, of course, from Asia. Um, there were so many messages. I was like, oh my God, this is way beyond me. There's significant cultural issues across the world. They're not all the same, but they're very similar, especially between the Middle East and Asia. Very similar cultural considerations amongst our communities. And I was just like, this is like a Pandora's box that I've opened, and there's really no turning back now. So that's really how I started to realize that I probably need to start a nonprofit organization, to start helping patients and their families, by educating them, by destigmatizing, by creating awareness, by letting them know that this is not something you should leave untreated, that it can pose a danger unnecessarily to your life if you leave it untreated. So I trained a couple of patients to work with me, who are of South Asian descent. One is in India, one is in the UK. And we formed a patient advocacy team called IBD Desis, which means South Asian IBD. Desi means South Asian. And like within months of forming that, there were doctors approaching us saying, we need to make this a nonprofit. And so we formed South Asian IBD Alliance in July 2021. And it is run by doctors and patients. It's clinician and patient led. And we do a lot of work in the community, on a grassroots level. Even though we're a US based charity, we have a global impact. So, cultural competence is really a major goal of ours. Of course, patients need to be empowered, they need to be aware. And physicians, of all kinds, need to be aware of this illness. It's exploding in our community at rates that are unprecedented. And not only that, like, it's important for physicians to understand these might be the barriers that a patient may not be speaking about it, but there might be barriers, and there might be avenues to refer patients to a social worker or psychologist or to a dietitian because they don't know how to get the nutrients that they might need, the nutrition that they might need, given, all the malabsorption that happens with IBD. So we're doing a lot of work on those two prongs in education, both physician and patient. But we're also doing a lot of research work to advance the research, because the reality is that this disease is growing at explosive rates in the South Asian community and in the broader Asian community. And we need to have answers. Why is this happening? Are there certain medications that work better on our community than other communities? So, diet and nutrition is a very complex subject, especially in a disease like IBD or in any gastrointestinal disorder. I would say consult a dietitian from the very beginning. If your doctor's office doesn't have a dietitian, seek one out. There are resources online for you to find, especially a registered dietitian who may have some focus in the GI space, some understanding of the malabsorption that's happening. The other thing I want to make sure I say about diet is that no one diet works for everyone in IBD. I think a huge part of my journey was educating myself on this disease and really accepting and owning my Crohn's. And one of the reasons why I do this work is because I don't want other patients to suffer like I have, but I also don't want them to suffer in shame and in silence. There's so much stigma in American culture, but then you broaden out into communities of color, and this is going to affect your family's reputation. This is going to bring shame upon your family. Not only will you not get married, your brother or sister may not get married. It's that much shame. You know, for me to have come out and done this, it was really hard for me. But now that I have, I feel so much happiness and so much meaning to have contributed to other people's lives, to help them understand this disease better and understand that they may need treatment and understand that they may need to modify their diet and their lifestyle, and that they may need to just become more educated about this disease, and that it's okay if you need surgery. It's not your own failure. If you need an ostomy, it's not something that you've done wrong. There is also this belief in Asian cultures around karma, that we did something wrong in a previous birth or earlier in our life and that we deserve this. I don't want anybody to feel that way, because I felt that way, that I had done this to myself. Um, this is a disease process. We deal with it head on. And I feel that, I feel satisfied that I've been able to help people in the community, but I also feel like I have a lot more work to do. This is a disease that is causing rampant disability and debilitation across the world. I want to make sure that my organization can help bring medication into the developing world that hasn't since existed. We are working towards that. We are trying to work towards more phase 4 clinical trials in different countries to make sure people have access. It's one thing to educate patients, it's another to give them access. So there is still a lot more work to be done, and I recognize that, and I'm learning every day. And I just feel like if I can learn and share with others and do it in with humility, then my life's purpose is sort of, served.